Hey, it's Coach Brian from Minlax.com. Today we're going to work on a top string with a mesh pocket. So we've got a STX Proton, one of the original ones, lime green, pretty cool looking. So when we start out with these top strings, I like to get about 28 inches worth of sidewall, cross-laced top string. You can use whatever you want. I also like to use a cheater string. Cheater string can be any length, probably going to want about 6 inches or so, but it's going to help us tie off the far side while we're still getting our top string nice and tight. So we start off with our mesh. We're going to want to fold it over, and we're either going to have 10 diamonds across the top or 9 diamonds, assuming we're using 10 diamond mesh. So we're going to start this out. I've got this one set where it looks like it's going to need 10 diamonds going across the top. So as you can see, I've already got this folded over, and I like to pinch down on each little section of the mesh and really squish it down to give those diamonds a nice hard shape. So we're going to start off by installing the cheater string. So I'm using this lime green string. Maybe it's neon yellow if the lighting's kind of bad. I'm going to go ahead, feed it through this top hole on the far side. I'm going to bring part of that in. I'm going to bring it through this top diamond on the far side of the mesh. And I'm just going to go ahead and tie this off. I'm going to get it nice and tight, and that's going to hold everything in place. So I'm just going to tie that. It doesn't have to be a permanent knot, but you do want it nice and snug. So we've got that. That's our cheater string, and now it's going to hold this end in place. So now we can start over here on our actual side with the top string. So we're going to take our top string, and we're going to tie a knot in one end of it. So I'm going to spin this around. Probably be easier if my fingers were clear, but you're just going to have to bear with me. And just going to pull that tight. And I like to leave as little amount of a tail here as possible, because there's nothing worse than getting all the way to the far side and not having enough, and having it sitting here on the other end. So we're going to go ahead, get that nice and tight. I'm going to bring this through the top hole on the other side, and I'm going to bring it into the mesh. And this first sole of the diamonds on the top row, pull that all the way through. Then I'm going to bring the string around the side and back into this same hole here. I'm going to pull that slack through. Now I'm going to bring it back through that same diamond, and now we're going to pull this nice and tight, and we're on our way to stringing this top string. So we've got this part nice and tight in there, and now we're ready to line up our diamonds. So you can either line up each diamond to one of the specific holes in the plastic, or you can split that gap between the two. So that's what we're going to be doing. So we're going to join this gap, we'll then join that gap, this gap through here, and finish over here on the far side. So to start out, and again, for this, you guys are looking at the back of the head. I'm looking at the front of it when I string. Normally when I string, I like to look at the back, but it's easier to show you guys what I'm doing on film. So, I'm going to bring my top string into the next hole, coming across in the mesh. So that's going to come across. If it's twisted up at all, you kind of want to spin that string around, get any of those twists out. I'm then going to come up into first hole on the top of the plastic. And I don't want to pull this really tight just yet. There's a special way we're going to pull this knot through. So once I've got this coming down from the plastic, you can see this little gap right here where I've got my pinky. I'm going to bring the string into that gap, and now it's coming towards my face. And again, we don't want to pull it tight, but definitely get the slack through. So now I've got this other big gap here. I'm going to push the string through that gap, and then it's going to come back into the same hole in the plastic. And then it's going to come down in the front. And I'll spin this around, and you guys will be able to see this little loop right here. When I come back in through this hole in the top, this comes down and through. I call this part the little collar. So it comes down through that collar. So let me spin this around again. So when we go to tighten this up, we're going to pull the first part that we strung through. So I like to pinch right here at the base of the head, at the base of this hole, and then pull this knot, the string nice and through, and then I like to wedge my finger down once it's tight and hold that in place. I'll spin it around and I'll grab this part of the collar that we talked about and start pulling this across. And then as soon as that tightens up, I'll keep my finger holding this down here in the back, holding that nice and tight. And I'm going to pull down this tail part, and that's going to pull the rest of the knot through. Once I get that, I kind of wiggle it up and down a little bit to get that nice and tight. And then we're just going to go ahead, finish up this first knot, and bring it into the next diamond across. And you can kind of cinch that up, and you can see how that's going to start to form on our pocket. So again, we're going to keep working across here. We'll go into the next hole in the mesh, coming towards us. Again, get any twists out of here. I'm going to then come into this top hole on the plastic, in through there again, not pulling too tight. I'm then going to come through this gap, bring it towards myself again. It then comes around and back into the wider gap right through here. And this is where, if you're looking at the front, you can start to form that collar. I'm then going to come into the same hole in the plastic, and then I come down through the collar in the front. So I'll spin this around so you can see I came back in through this top hole in the plastic, down through our collar. Again, I'm not going to pull this tight all the way. That's where we start. Back here in the back, we're going to pull this first part. You can see it starts to draw this whole section up. We want that really tight, no slack at all. So I get that nice and tight, and I'm going to plant my finger right there to hold that in place. Then I'm going to pull the collar around from the front, and that'll start to tighten up. So you can see I've pulled this around, and I'm going to pull down the bottom tail part, and that's going to tighten this whole knot together. And then I like to kind of push down, bring that up. That's going to take any extra slack out of here. And then to finish this knot section up, we just pull in this next hole in the mesh. So again, we'll make sure we twist this line around in case it does start to get twisted up. We don't want that at all, nice and straight. So again, you can start to see we've already got the first two parts of our top string on here. So now I'm going to finish this up over here, coming in through this next diamond in the mesh, and then going to come, as you can see, just spinning the head around, then going to come into the next hole in the plastic. It then goes around through this gap, pick it back up. It's going to come all the way around, and that's where we start to form that collar. And again, right now you're looking at the front of the head instead. I then come in through this hole again in the plastic, and as this comes out, I'm going to bring it down, pull it in through this collar. And again, not too tight, because when we go to tighten it up, we start back here, we pull the first section, and we get that nice and tight. Take out all that slack, and then put down a finger, clamp that in place. I'm going to spin it around, and I start to pull this collar across. And again, that gets nice and tight. Once I have that, I can pull down on the tail. As soon as that tail's tight, clamp that in place, and that one's ready to go. To finish this knot off, come back in to this next diamond, and pull all that through. As you can start to see again, our top string's coming across, and now we're just going to go ahead and finish it up with our last one. As we're going across through here, you want to make sure this cheater string stays nice and tight. If that starts to come loose, it's not the end of the world, but it makes it a lot harder. This really makes it a little more hands-free. So again, I'm going to go ahead to start this next one, come into the next row of diamonds, bring that through. It's then going to come up into this next hole in the plastic, bring it around. It's going to come in through this gap. I'm going to bring it down. It's going to come in through this next smaller gap over here, coming towards me. Again, we don't want this too tight just yet. The last part, I bring it through the hole in the plastic, and I'm going to go down through this collar. And again, don't pull that too tight yet. We'll spin that around. We're going to pull the first part of our knot through. Get that nice and tight. Get that finger in place to hold that tight. Then as you can see, I'm just going to pull the rest of the collar through. That's going to pull that slack around. And once that's there, I can pull down the tail, and that finishes that knot. And again, I'm just going to kind of wiggle it up, wiggle it down a little bit, get that nice and tight, and then to finish, I'm just coming in through my next hole in the mesh, in through that diamond, And now it's time we can get rid of this cheater string over here. So just go ahead and untie it and toss it to the side. We're done with it. So to finish up, we always want to keep this a mirror image. What we do on one side of the head, we want to go ahead and do on the other side of the head. So I'm going to go into my last hole in the mesh, in through that diamond. It's then going to come in through this last hole in the plastic on my top. I'm then going to bring it around the mesh again, and it's going to go over the top of the string we just put through, just so we're like on the other side over here. And then I bring it through the hole in the plastic. There it is. Now, we don't want to pull that tight just yet. Again, another little trick to getting this the right way. I'm going to pull the first part, get all the slack out of there that I can. Pulling that tight, and I want to kind of plant my finger there again, hold it in place. Then we're going to pull the tail, try and get all that, pull all the slack through. And then we've got our top string. And one of the tricky parts is tying this knot as close to the plastic as possible. That way it's going to stay nice and tight. So I like to spin it around. I kind of pinch off where I want it next to the plastic, bring the tail through this loop, and I kind of hold down with my finger. That's going to keep everything nice and tight. And again, if my fingers were clear, it'd be a lot easier to see. But this is what I have to work with. And there you go. We've got a top string. You guys can check it out. It's ready to go. We'll have other tips and videos as far as how to do our sidewalls, bottom string, get the shooters, so you guys will be able to see this lime green proton go all the way through the bases. And we'll see you next time. Thanks guys. It's Coach Brian from Lac signing off.